Webinar today, Measuring What Matters, Creating Standard Performance Metrics for Charitable Gift Planners. My name is Jeremy Stelter. I'm the Director of Business Development for the Western U.S. at the Stelter Company, and I'm happy to be here today to introduce our speaker, Joe Boll. But before I do, I'd like to say a few words about our webinar series. As an industry leader in plan giving marketing, Stelter is committed to providing innovative solutions and education for our industry. We're happy to host this complimentary webinar today, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the year. Today's webinar is the final of our 2018 curriculum. If you've missed any of the others, please go to our website where there's a library of webinar recordings and presentations that are free for you to enjoy. Our 2019 curriculum will be coming out soon, so watch your inboxes for that. Back to the presentation, Measuring What Matters, presented by Joe Boll. Joe Boll is the Assistant Vice President of Development at Carnegie Mellon University. He has over 33 years of experience in the philanthropic arena, with roles at The Ohio State University, Duke University, North Carolina State University, the Nature Conservancy, and the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Joe is the chair of the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners National Metrics Task Force and served as chair of NACGP board in 2005. He currently serves on the board of directors of the American Council on Charitable Gift Annuities. We are so fortunate and honored to have Joe with us today, and very appreciative of his expertise and commitment to our great industry and the motion that he's putting in place with this new initiative. So thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you, Jeremy, and welcome everyone to our session. Thank you for doing this. It is December the 12th, and the year end is only 2 weeks plus away, and I know we all have 18 emails and 5 or 6 voicemails with donors wanting to do year-end gifts, and so taking the time to be with us is to learn this is really appreciative on our part. Let's start with some vocabulary to make sure we're all on the same page. Metrics are measurable activity goals. Josh Burkholz, who we'll talk about later, calls them a playbook for success. Much like a football team has a playbook, our metrics are what we do on a daily basis that actually leads to our success. That should not be confused with analytics. Oftentimes, those two terms are confused. Analytics is the discovery of meaningful patterns in data and then interpreting those to allow us to do our work better, to make predictions on how things might work. We will talk about analytics slightly as part of this presentation. And then finally, there's best practices. And best practices are what an industry deems to be how our work is done best. Best practices are not proscriptive or prescriptive. You shouldn't have to do them, but it gives you a good framework on how other people are successful doing this work or doing any kind of a work, and it becomes the basis of benchmarking, which is an important construct as we go forward in this process. Now, some people find metrics to be beneficial, and other people find metrics to be rather tyrannical. It's hopeful that at the end of this process, when we're done with our gift planning metrics, that we will be much more on the beneficial side of things than the tyrannical side of things. But right now, we're kind of in between. Benz Whaley Flessner, the fundraising consulting firm based out of Minneapolis, did a survey a few years ago of 660 of us, frontline fundraisers. And two of the results of this study are really kind of interesting. 60% of us say that our goals are inappropriate. The way we're measured, the way our bosses do our performance reviews are inappropriate. 42% say that how we're measured is detrimental at worst and ineffective at best. So there's a fair amount of consternation amongst frontline fundraisers on how they are measured, which is kind of interesting because management views metrics as a way to get everybody to work together as a team, to row the boat in rhythm, to row the boat in a singular direction, to get us to a point where we can be the most efficient for our work and for the organizations we represent. That's how it should be in the perfect world, and that's how management actually views metrics. Unfortunately, those of us on the front lines have a different view of how metrics are used to row the boat, if you remember the original Ben-Hur movie. There is a conflict here that we just can't avoid, and hopefully this process that we're going through with CGP will help us create a common nomenclature and a common set of goals that all of us can adhere to, both as frontline gift planners and those that manage us. So many gift planners that have been doing this for a really, really long time will say it's just absolute folly to try to measure the work of a gift planner, because the things we do are so spread across the board, are so diffuse, are so different that we just can't be measured. Well, I was having this discussion a year or so ago with a young person who's on our team. He's finishing up a PhD in history, really bright person. We're having this discussion, and he said to me, you know, that really sounds good, but you know, the MBAs have already won that argument. People are being measured across the board, and for you to say we are different and we can't be measured is a losing argument. So our challenge as an industry is to actually define our metrics before our metrics are defined for us. And that's what this project is all about. As a result, we put together a really broad-based task force. As you can see, and I'm not going to leave this slide up very long, we have people from really great diverse backgrounds. We have people from healthcare, we have people from education, we have people from social service, we have people from Benz Whaley Fusner and Grinzelbach Gleer, two of the larger fundraising consulting firms in America. We have Catherine Myrie, who we'll talk about later. It's a really good, broad-based, diverse group of really smart people that are trying to get us to a common end. So as a result, we were given a charge from the CGP Board of Directors, and that charge came in 3 phases. First, we need to define the value of gift planning. Secondly, create a series of metrics for gift planning programs. And then third, a series of metrics so that our bosses can do our performance reviews in a much more sane manner than many of us are experiencing today. So let's start with phase 1. Defining the value of gift planning. That became important because as you look back, and we all know, after 2008, after the Great Recession, after the too big to fail era, the number of gift planning programs that either were greatly reduced or actually terminated was really large. In the financial turmoil of that period, some organizations felt that they did not have the luxury of having a gift planning program. And so the idea is, let's come up with a series of hard data points that actually can show not to any organization why a gift planning program is important to them. So as part of that, we are relying on the work of our good friend, Professor Russell James. I don't know if any of you have read I know you've all know Russell and know of him and read many of his things. I don't know if any of you have read this book. It's quite fascinating, actually, once you get past the science part of it. But Russell, as you know, has done a tremendous amount of data mining in a database that is put together for the National Institute of Aging, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's run by the University of Michigan. It's close to a 30-year-old study with 30,000 participants, and it's a longitudinal study. And they're interviewed every year, and they're actually personally interviewed every other year. And so the data is really based on how families do their financial planning, how families handle their resources. But Russell discovered there's a significant component of philanthropic data buried in there that he's been mining. So that's one of the main points that we're using in this analysis. So the first thing he found out of this data is that estate gifts are much larger than annual gifts. Totally over the population, it's a factor of 5. And as you can see from this chart, the greater the wealth is, the higher that number is. Based on that, we took a look at our own data at Carnegie Mellon. Now, this data is about a year old, but it's even better as we look forward. Since 1993, we have 603 bequest donors. Now, we only have good data that goes back to 1993 for a variety of reasons, but we still have 25 years of good data. So we have received gifts from 603 estates, totaling almost $200 million. Of those 603 individuals, their cumulative lifetime giving was $65 million. That's a factor of 3x or 204% larger, however you want to look at it. It is a significant difference on what they gave us from their estate versus what they gave us during their lifetimes. Interestingly enough, 47% of those 603 people had cumulative lifetime giving of less than $1,000. 32% of those 603 donors had cumulative lifetime giving of less than $100. And 27% of those 603 donors never gave us a penny during their lifetime. Their only gift to the university was their estate gift. It would be really good, I think, as a part of your analysis to maybe go back and run that if you have the ability to do that kind of data and look at that and really show has been a real eye-opener for many people here at this institution. Back to Russell James. He shows out of this data from the NIH that once an individual has put a charity in their estate plan, their annual giving jumps by $3,000 a year based on his data. Now, if you think about that, that makes some sense. I had a law professor that said that when you leave this world, you can only leave your assets to people and organizations that help people. You can't leave your organizations to General Mills or General Foods or General Motors. You can only leave them to organizations that help people and people. And if you think about who the people are that we can leave money to out of our estate, it's generally family and loved ones and people that have the status of family. So if someone puts your organization in their estate plan, they have elevated your organization to the status of a family member. And as a result of that, they're going to be more generous during their lifetime because they've made that commitment to include you as part of their family. The Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University did a similar study with Midwestern nonprofit organizations, with Midwest being a relatively largely defined geographic area. They found that people that have charities in their will, annual gifts, actually are more than double the size of people that don't have charity in their wills. And finally, the American Council on Gift Annuities this spring released its biannual study and analysis of the gift annuity world. And 71% of gift annuity donors continue with their usual annual gifts, and a full quarter of them increase their annual gifts. Only about 6% of people that make a gift annuity actually reduce their gift, their annual gift. So at the end of the day, it might be easy to say, if you want to increase your annual fund, you should increase the size of your gift planning program. The data shows that planned gift donors make more annual gifts. Now, I actually said that to a group of fundraisers at Carnegie Mellon, and the director of philanthropy for our School of Computer Science, held up his hand and he said, "My friend, I fear that you have confused correlation and causation." And he's correct. There is not a cause and effect, but there certainly is a correlation between those that are plan gift donors and the amount that they give annually. And it's a wonderful argument to make on why your plan giving program should flourish even in down times. This is an organization that is kind of the Stelter of Australia, a fundraising consulting firm in Australia. And they have some really good data that's available to them that's mandated by law that all nonprofits put forward. They have more data they can mine in Australia than we do in the United States. But at the end of the day, look at the ROI. The bequest ROI is so much better than any other form of fundraising. And that is something that many of our organizations are looking at today. All of that said, that's all really good, but we have a time horizon issue that we have to face in this work. And that is, our organizations need cash today. Our leadership wants cash on their watch. They understand that they have a fiduciary responsibility to the longer term well-being of the organization, and plan gifts are great for that purpose. But you know, at the end of the day, in many ways, we'd rather have $1 today than $2 tomorrow. That's the organizational reality we live in. We live in a short-term time horizon mentality, and as we all know, gift planning is a long-term proposition. There's a real challenge there. And so I think part of our metrics should be to show that it's both, that our gift planning programs provide both. It's not just deferred gifts. Interesting data from the Congressional Budget Office helps inform this. This is a chart of how much wealth is held by households in the United States. The Congressional Budget Office first released this study in 1989, and the top 10% of the population held 60% of the wealth in the country. The middle 40% held 30%, and the bottom 50% held 3%. Well, it took 24 years before the Congressional Budget Office reran this same study. It's an interesting long period of time. So here's what happened in 2013. The top 10% increased by 13%. They now, 3/4 of every dollar of wealth in this country is held by the top 10% of the population. The middle third lost 23% and hold less than 1/4 of the wealth. And the bottom 50% lost 2/3 of what they had and only hold 1%. Now, this slide is not in here for any kind of a political statement. This slide is in here for us to contemplate where are most of our major gifts made and where are most of our planned gifts made. The top 10% of the population tend to be more of our principal gifts, those big gifts that we all see in the newspaper. But where is your bread and butter plan giving donor coming from? Where is your bread and butter major gift donor coming from? They're coming from that middle 40%. And if that middle 40% has lost a full 1/4 of its wealth, isn't that going to impact how they do their philanthropy? It's not going to make them less philanthropic. It's going to impact how they do it. Is it any wonder that we've seen the rise of blended gifts in the last 10 years or so? It's because that middle 40% need to use blended gifts to make their major gifts in ways that they didn't need to use them earlier. And we will talk about this a little bit more as we go forward. Back to Professor James. 80 cents out of every dollar of charitable bequests are given from people that die after the age of 80. And I think we all know that. It's kind of, I used to use this running joke that Ponce de Leon was looking for the fountain of youth in the wrong place. All he needed to do was to establish a charitable gift annuity, and he would have found the fountain of youth. How many of us know of charitable gift annuitants that far outlive their life expectancy? And that is part of what this shows, that people that are generous and philanthropic in their will die much later. In addition to that, Professor James' data shows that the median age, that is, half the people die after this and half the people die before this, of a charitable bequest is 89. Robert Sharp has data from his firm that goes back almost 60 years, and their median age of death is 87. So we could split the difference and say that the average charitable bequest donor dies at the age of 88. The Australian study that we talked about earlier also showed that almost a third of the people wrote their final will within 2 years of their death, and 60% wrote their final will within 5 years of their death. So think about this. If the median age of death for the average charitable bequest donor is 88 years old, and a 68-year-old person informs you that they have included your organization in their will, your organization has a 20-year stewardship challenge in front of it. Because 60% of those people are going to change their will within 5 years, and a full third are going to change it within 2 years. If you forget about them, if they think you don't love them anymore, and they go to change that will, what is the only will we want to be in? The last will. If we're in the will at 68 and not at 88, it really doesn't matter. So we have a stewardship challenge in all of our organizations, and our gift planning metrics should account for that. The challenge we have is that people want us, we all know this, gift planning donors want us to get dirt under our fingernails. They want us to work with them on a regular basis, to be part of their lives, be part of their planning, help them grow that philanthropic seed. The challenge we have is that our organizations want to receive the bouquet. Many of our organizations don't have the patience to do the good, dirty gift planning work that we have. That's the challenge that faces us, and hopefully some of this metrics can help us get there.
Okay, well, that's the end of your first section, Joe, and we've only had a couple questions, and they've all been pertaining to wanting your slide deck. So, yes, you guys will have access to the slides in the recording early next week. So, and if you have any questions, we do encourage you to go ahead and send them on in during the presentation. We have one more point where we'll stop to see if you have any, and then we'll take the rest of them at the end. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Jen. Well, let's get right back at it. So let's look at phase 2 of our charge, and that is looking at gift planning program metrics. What we were looking at is how do we do the metrics of our programs we think is very important because, as you all know, we're only caretakers of our program. There are people before us and there will be people after us. And we want to be able to show that gift planning is a longitudinal institutional priority. So what we're going to base this on is the CGP counting guidelines that were promulgated about a dozen years ago, back when there was some real concern about some organizations that were really trying to downplay the value of gift planning in fundraising organizations. And CGP had a wonderful task force that put these together. If you're not familiar with those, you can find them at the CGP website, and I would really recommend them to your reading. Here is the real basis of them. Any individual that makes a gift to your organization can only make that gift in one of 3 buckets. They can only drop that gift in only one of 3 buckets. They can either make an outright gift to you, cash, stock, real estate, pledges, those kind of things that our major gift officers and our annual gift officers deal with on a daily basis. And we do too. Cash on the barrelhead. That's bucket A. The second bucket are those irrevocable plan gifts that the organization knows we're going to get. We just don't know when we're going to get them from the organization's perspective. That's charitable gift annuities and charitable remainder trusts, where the charitable remainder is irrevocably designated. And then finally, there are those bucket of gifts. I have you in my will. I've made you the beneficiary of my retirement plan. I've made you the beneficiary of my life insurance policy. I have you in my trust. All things that the donor can change or circumstances can change. We all know of people that have our organizations in their wills, and they outlive their assets because of significant health challenges at the end of their life. And what they thought was going to be a $200,000 gift is now about a $20,000 gift because of the costs of living to maintain their life in the last years of their lives. That, by definition, is a revocable gift. So if you think about it, that's how our donors can give to us. And how we then, you roll those all together, and that would be your campaign total. Now, I will refer to these as bucket 1, bucket 2, and bucket 3. I list A, B, and C here, but I'm going to call them bucket 1 is the outright gifts, bucket 2 are the irrevocable gifts, and bucket C are the revocable gifts. That will be my nomenclature going forward in this presentation. So Catherine Myrie, as I mentioned and as you saw, is on the task force. And I think there's no one in our industry that has done more study and more writing and more presentations on plan giving metrics than Catherine has. And she had a really good set of metrics that we thought there's no sense to reinvent the wheel. Catherine's already done this heavy lifting for us. So here's what we think that managers need to know about our gift planning programs. They need to know the number of new gifts and the number of commitments in each of the 3 buckets. We also need to be able to show them the pipeline. And the pipeline in the 3 buckets, which is different than the new gifts. I mean, new gifts is what's come in this year. We need to show the pipeline. And what's really important as part of this pipeline and as part of the new commitments is our ability to show when someone dies and that estate is distributed, and that's actually spendable cash for the organization, for the endowment, for capital, for programming. We need to be able to show that our gift planning programs are not just future focused, but that actuarial science is our friend, and that if we have our program long enough, the pipeline will work and actuarial science will work, and there will be assets for the institution to use for its charitable purposes. Too often, I don't think our gift planning programs do a good enough job of making that differentiation. Part of that is we are counting bequest expectancies in a campaign, and so when somebody dies, you can't double count that as cash. But we need to be able to show that it actually does arrive. We need to be able to show cash flow, not necessarily campaign commitments. We need to be able to show the work of our gift planning program through the pipeline, through identification, through proposals, through gifts in buckets 1, buckets 2, and buckets 3, and then if there's a bucket 2 or bucket 3 gift and someone dies, then that becomes a bucket 1 gift from cash flow. We need to be able to show that. We need to be able to show how many blended gifts our organization gets in any given year. And that takes a huge amount of our time, as we all know. We also need to be able to show the number and the dollar amount of non-cash gifts, because a lot of times those gifts come through our offices and take our time up. And we need to be able to show that our marketing program really works. This is what we've sent out. These are the responses we have. These are the gifts or the discussions or the proposals that are in place because of the responses to our marketing. That's what we need to be able to show our managers as a gift planning program. Additionally, we need to take some of this data and be able to show some interesting analytics. How many people that died this year did we know of their bequest ahead of time? Going back to my Carnegie Mellon slide, what was their lifetime giving versus what their estate gift was? So a really good, easy practice that you could implement tomorrow is that the next time you open the mail and you get a letter from an attorney or a notice of probate that your organization is actually receiving money from somebody's estate, the first two things you should do is find out, A, did we know about this? And B, how much did they give us while they were alive? Do it right then. And then keep that data forward and be able to run that as an analytic to show exactly how the gift planning program actually works. Do some analytics on the number of multi-year annual donors that have a planned gift on your system, the number of endowment donors that have a planned gift on your system. We actually did that one recently at our place at Carnegie Mellon, and we discovered 400 people that are alive that have given us enough money to create an endowment that do not have a planned gift on our system. That's 400 really interesting planned gift conversations that we need to have over the next period of time. And how many major gift calls have a planned giving component to them? How many joint calls are made? How much coaching have you done of your major gift officers so that they can actually talk about planned giving opportunities in a major gift call? Those are really interesting analytics that we could and should use going forward. About 2 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, our task force and CGP entered into a partnership with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It is run out of the Urban Institute. It is largely funded by AFP. And they actually have the largest database of fundraising data in the world. They partner with all of the software vendors, Blackbaud, Illusion, Donor Perfect, etc. And they have non-identifiable data. I mean, they can't say this gift came from Mr. X or Mrs. Y, but they know that this gift came in and they can analyze it. That data really is largely focused on annual gifts and major gifts. They have no planned gift data. We have been and continue to be very excited about this partnership. So we've been working on this for about 2 years. We developed a series of alpha testers. As you can see, a really good diverse set of types of organizations, religious, healthcare, education, public television, environment, social service. We have a really good set of broad-based organizations that had the data that were going to try to help us pull the data. Our idea was we're going to create a piece of software or some sort of a database that we can pull and grab this data and actually have reports that all of us can share and use and benchmark against and that sort of thing. That's the road we were going down. Emphasis on were. The conundrum we've discovered is we know what we want to collect data-wise, and then we ran into a challenge of our actual ability to collect it. Pretty simple what we want to collect. What we discovered is that we have a nomenclature challenge. There probably aren't very many people on this call that actually remember the Paul Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke. Those of you that don't, it's a classic. Get it on Netflix. Go look at it. But there's a famous line in that movie, what we have here is failure to communicate. And that's kind of what we discovered, failure to communicate. Some organizations call them bequest expectancies. Some organizations call them will intentions. Some organizations call them estate expectations. We all know they're the same thing, but when you go to pull data, the computer doesn't know that. And how do you program for a myriad of different data or names of the same thing? They don't appear in the same place. We do not have an industry common nomenclature. Part of that is, gift planners have traditionally kind of been kind of DIY people. We do it ourselves. We are independent. It's kind of the Wild West. We don't have, there's a common nomenclature in annual giving. There's libunts and sibunts and all of those things. There's common nomenclature in major gifts. there's not common nomenclature in gift planning. That's a challenge when you go to try to collect data on a large scale. So what we decided to do is return to the basics. Let's go back to what it is we're trying to do. So we go back to that slide that says what your managers need to know. Our goal is to come up with a dashboard, a series of reports, those kind of things that all of us across the industry can use and have a common look to it. Once we develop this common nomenclature, this common language, these common reports, it then becomes easier to go back to software vendors and other places to try to create that common nomenclature so that bequest expectancies in Razor's Edge mean bequest expectancies in Donor Perfect. And we're not calling them different things, that we're measuring them the same way. Therefore, we can then create benchmark reporting. We can create national data. We can create these kind of reports and these kind of information that Russell James has in the Indiana School and the ACGA have shown. We can create that so that we can actually show what a good gift planning program looks like from an output perspective. Any questions related?
Yeah. Actually, we do have a couple questions, Joe. We have 3 that I'm going to save for the end because I think you might touch on it in your next section and they'll be better just kind of as wrap-up questions. But 2 that were more specific to this section. Sherry was asking, you mentioned you advised them to do some reading if they hadn't done it, and she's wondering where she can go to do that reading, if there's a website. I'm wondering
if you go to
about... Yeah,
the CGP counting guidelines, and so go to, I think it's nacgp.org, I think, is that the, I would go there on my computer screen right now, but I would lose the presentation. So I think it's, it's nacgp.org. And then there's the drop-down menu on resources, and then the counting guidelines are in there.
Okay. Yeah, and if it's not that, if you Google, the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, that will get you to their website for sure.
Yes. I just don't remember what their exact web address is.
Okay, great. And then the second one is from William, and it's kind of goes along with your comment about having challenges with nomenclature. He's wondering, there was a time you were talking about the buckets of giving, and you were talking about campaigns, and he would like to know what you mean specifically by the word campaign. Are you talking about capital campaigns specifically, or are you talking about just a fiscal year of fundraising if they're not in an official campaign?
Yeah, both. I mean, the guidelines contemplate both annual reporting and multi-year campaign reporting. The idea is that those buckets, I mean, those are the only 3 ways people can give to your organization. So you could use those 3 buckets to say, here's what happened this year, or you could aggregate multiple years of those buckets and say, here's what comes out of our campaign, whether you call it a capital campaign or a comprehensive campaign or whatever you choose to call it. The guidelines contemplate both.
Great. And we have some very resourceful people on the line. I've gotten 3 people that have let us know what that website is. It is charitablegiftplanners.org. So charitablegiftplanners.org. Yes, thanks to William, George, and Amy for sending that in. And that's the questions we have for now. Yeah, we'll go ahead and finish on with the presentation.
I guess that shows how feeble my memory is, right? So thanks for sending that. Thanks for being on the uptick on that. Okay, let's go forward. Here's where the rubber really hits the road, folks. How does your boss do your performance review? How does my boss do my performance review? How do I do the performance reviews of the people on my team? Part of the challenge is that a lot of organizations, our gift planners, are measured exactly the same way as our major gift officers. So let's look at that for a second. If you think about most organizations, you have generally 4 gift officer roles for people that work with individuals. We're taking corporate and foundation off the table. We have our annual gift officers that work with a lot of smaller gifts, and as many people grow in their career, they go through these phases, and ultimately you become a principal gift officer, and you're working on a very small amount of people that make very, very, very large gifts. Well, what fundraising group is not contemplated in this continuum? Our gift planners. Our gift planners. That's because we work with stock gifts. We work with real estate gifts. We work with wills and trusts, and we work with pieces of tangible personal property, whether they're worth $5 million or $500. It's many of our offices work with those assets regardless of the size. Just as a personal aside, the picture there on the end is actually one of the neatest gifts I've ever worked on in my career. Last year, Carnegie Mellon received 2 Enigma machines. We are now one of 20 organizations worldwide that has more than one Enigma machine, and it was one of the most fascinating gifts I've ever worked with a wonderfully fascinating donor with a great story. So what we need to do is look at the metrics for gift planning for the job that gift planners do. Because if you look above the bar here, the metrics for a principal gift officer are based on that big dollar sign. The metrics for a major gift officer are based on those dollar signs. But you don't see any dollar signs below for gift planning because we do different things. Our personal metrics need to reflect the reality that our jobs are different than those of our colleagues that do major gifts and principal gifts, and many organizations don't realize that reality. So I'm sure many of you have done major gifts either as part of your job now or as part of your job in the past. Were we a live audience, I would ask you how long the average major gift call lasts. It generally revolves around 1 hour. Some people say it's 45 minutes, but it never is more than an hour. And why is that? Because think about who your major gift donors are. A lot of them are still very active in their careers, and that's about all the time they have to give to you. Then, how long does the average planned gift call last? It generally lands around 3 hours. Some people say 2, some people say all day. It kind of falls in that average planned gift call is 3 hours. The average major gift call is 1 hour. Now, suppose that in your organization, both major gift officers and gift planning officers have a call goal to make 100 face-to-face calls every year. Well, then think about that. That math doesn't work. You're asking your gift planners to work 3 times longer than your major gift donors. So we need to contemplate the reality of our work. We're dealing with people that are retired by and large, people that the only thing they have is time, people that need our attention and deserve our attention. It's a different call. It's a different way of looking at things, and we cannot have equal call goals for major gift officers and plain gift officers to go along with that reality. You probably saw, if you look at it closely, and I mentioned it, Kapanakis, who is the main data person at Grinzelbach Gleer, is on our task force, and she ran some really interesting numbers from their database. And I'd like to just focus on the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Gift planning officers have on the median, carry larger prospect portfolios than major gift officers do. Gift planning officers make significantly less calls annually than major gift officers do, 55 to 72. Gift planning officers close gifts at a higher rate than major gift officers, and the median gift of a gift planner is larger than the median gift of a major gift officer. We carry bigger portfolios, we make less calls, we close them at a higher rate, and we close bigger gifts. That's data from Grinzenbach-Gleer clients. This is Josh Burkholz, who is the main data person and a principal at Men's Whaley Flessner. About 4 years ago, Josh published this book, Fundraising Analytics. I'd actually commend it to you. You'll learn a lot about regression analysis, things I didn't know. It is kind of a tough read if you're not mathematically inclined, but it's really interesting in him looking at analytics. Josh kind of realized the same thing as part of our task force that we did, is that there's all kinds of data and all kinds of analytics for annual gifts, all kinds of data and all kinds of analytics for major gifts, and there's virtually none for planned gifts. So Josh did a study similar to what Kat did based on their client base. 1,000 gift officers they looked at. In these organizations, the average is there's one planned giving officer for every 15 major gift officers. Not surprising. Like the Grinzenbach-Gleer, like Kat study, planned giving portfolio sizes are 50% larger than major gift portfolio sizes. Like the Grinzenbach-Gleer study, planned giving officers visit 25% less than their major gift colleagues. Planned gift and major gift officers solicit at equivalent rates, and they close at equivalent rates, but the gifts are 25% larger from the planned gift solicitations than from the major gift solicitations. So we have data from two of the largest fundraising consulting firms in the country showing that we have higher, gift planners have higher portfolios. I'm using the first person, we have higher portfolios, we make less calls, and we actually raise larger average gifts. Josh's study also showed that major gift officers spend 80% of their time with donors prior to the solicitation. Our major gift officers spend all of their time cultivating and asking, and very little time stewarding after the gift. And that is because of the pressures and the way that we have, our organizations have created and done those jobs. His study also shows that gift planning officers spend 60% of their time with donors after the solicitation. It goes back to the Russell James and the Robert Sharp data. If the average age of death is 88, we've got 20 years of stewardship that we have to do. It is incumbent on our organizations that we do that. And if someone argues that, there is a real interesting business maxim that the best client is an existing client. It's easier and better for an organization to keep a client than it is to try to find a new client. And that stewardship work goes right down that road of keeping an existing client. Josh's study also showed that the significant amount of time that gift planning officers spend consulting with major officers is actually a net positive for our organizations. So if any of you have a boss that says you're spending too much time on this consulting stuff, we have data that shows that it's actually net positive. The major gift officers raise bigger and better gifts because of our consulting with them. And finally, Josh's study shows that it's important to go deeper into our prospect pools. This is more of a major gift thing, but it has some benefit to us as gift planners. If gift officer A makes 75 calls on 50 donors, that means that gift officer A is making multiple calls on a smaller pool of donors. Josh's point is that you actually are more efficient as a fundraiser if you minimize the number of multiple calls you make on a donor and actually call on more of the people in your portfolio. Obviously, there are donors, particularly when you're in the middle of negotiating or they're in the middle of writing their will, they're in the middle of selling their house. Those kind of like transitions that we all work with, of course you're going to have multiple calls with those people. But by and large, you're a more efficient fundraiser if you go deeper in your pool and make single calls on a larger portion of your pool. One of the things that we're looking at as we pull together these metrics categories is what do we measure? And one of the things that we need to measure is how do we develop opportunities to give that the number of strategic development meetings we have with our fellow gift officers, with attorneys, with financial planners, those kind of developing strategy kind of calls. Our number of donor interactions, in person, on the phone, on an email. If someone responds to your Stelter mailing and says, I'm very interested in a gift annuity, and 3 phone calls and 4 emails later, you have a $50,000 gift annuity, that is about one of the most efficient gifts you can ever raise in your organization. Now, is it important to go see those people face to face and say thank you? Of course it is. But we should also get credit for those kind of activities that we all do, where we close gifts on the phone or close gifts via email or both. We also need to go back to the Josh Burkholz thing. 60% of our time is based on stewardship. We need to account for that reality. Number of proposals is a very common metric that many people measure. We could put that in there. The number of gifts. Notice I say number. We all know about the $25,000 gift annuity that took longer than the $250,000 bequest expectancy. So that takes into account that some of our donors take an awful long time to actually finalize their gift. How much money came in 3 buckets? And we also want to factor in, and this is hugely important, length of service. It's really interesting that we are defined in many ways on an artificial 12-month period, when we know our gifts take much longer than that to develop. And if a gift closes on June the 28th, you've had a great year, but if it closes on July the 6th, your new year is off to a great start, but your former year wasn't quite so good. It's the same gift. That's an artificial barrier that gets in the way many times. We want to look at that. We want to measure ourselves like our investment colleagues do. I don't know if any of you ever go to your board meetings and hear the investment report. They don't say the Dow did this, the S&P did this, we did that, and sit down. They say, no, our 3-year returns are this, our 5-year returns are this, our 10-year returns are this, and here's our benchmarking and all that sort of stuff. Our gift is similarly longitudinally based. We should be measured over that period of time. Is it a 3-year period? Is it a 5-year period? I don't know. We are still debating that. Some of that also gets into if the average, how long do we stay at our organizations? And can we give people credit and actually raises for their longevity as opposed to the jumping around that we have in the industry? We're going down that road. And our work continues. We're not there yet. We're really making progress. We really thought that the data analysis was going to be kind of the be-all, end-all. Now we realize that we're up against a brick wall here, so we're making a pretty quick pivot, and we are really hopeful that in 2019 we will have a lot of this material for you to use in your organizations and for your own personal performance reviews. The internet is a really interesting thing. This is attributed to Albert Einstein, but I'm not sure it's an Einstein quote, but I'm going with it anyhow. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. That's the challenge we have in gift planning, metrics, and analytics.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe. We do have a handful of questions we'll get to. We're going to start with Doreen. Doreen she asks, how do we change the conversation with our supervisors to remind them that our best work as gift planners will not be seen in our lifetimes? I am realizing gifts from gift planners at my organization before me, and I hope that my work will yield gifts for gift planners long after me.
That is our challenge, and that's why we really want to show the pipeline. That's why I spent a fair amount of time talking about the pipeline when we're talking about the program. We we are the beneficiaries of gifts that people have been long since retired or even dead, and many of the donors that we work with today, their gifts won't be realized by the organization until we're long since retired or dead. That is the nature of our work, and that's why it's important to go back and actually try to create your pipeline, show where they came from, show how long you've been stewarding these people as they die. I think one of the things that we as gift planners as an industry have always done is we know because we see it every day and we live it, that people that don't live it the way we live it see what we say is anecdotal. And if we can come up with data to actually back up our anecdotal things, and that's why it's important for us to try to gather that data and actually make a very rational data-based argument to that very point.
Okay, and talking about stewardship, James wanted to make a point about that as well. He says that most of their metrics are based on discovery visits, qualifications, solicitations, etc. What metrics can we identify that show the important work that stewardship takes?
Right. That's where I think the Josh Burkholz study is really important, and we're really going to try to drill down on that and make that a much larger component of it. I'm not here to push any product, but Josh wrote an article in Planned Giving Today back in January of this year, January of 18. And I don't know whether you subscribe to Planned Giving Today or not, and I'm not selling Planned Giving Today's subscriptions here. But Josh wrote an article in Planned Giving Today back in January where he kind of set out this whole notion that 60% of the high performing Planned Giving officer time is spent on a stewardship call. Again, we have to make the case, and which is what we're trying to do, that gift planners work is different than major gift officer work, and we need what our hope is that you will have a set of materials or a set of guidelines that you can take and actually plug data from your organization in, as well as data that we've collected nationally to actually show that very thing. That for you to be measured on the number of solicitation calls or the number of cultivation calls you make and that sort of stuff, it's good, but that's not where the rubber hits the road. And one of the other things we don't have in there, and it's a little harder to find out, is the number of people that say they have you in their will, but you end up not being in their will after they die. That's almost as important as how did you know about it ahead of time, and that goes to show you some of that stewardship part. So I think that longitudinal pipeline of we knew about these people and they died and they have us in the will, and this is how much they gave us out of their will, but they only gave us 10% of that over their lifetime. Therefore, the stewardship component is hugely important. That kind of data goes to that measure or to that argument.
Okay. Don is asking, when you were comparing portfolios of major gift officers and gift planning officers, were you comparing present value of future gifts?
No, that was size. That was the number of people. So how many people are in your portfolio? How many donors in your portfolio? That's what that measure was. And the reason for that is that stewardship component. Once they make a gift, they stay in your portfolio so you can continue to steward them, and that's why the portfolios are bigger. It's not because it's bigger because you're trying to raise. It's largely a stewardship component, and that's why the portfolios are bigger.
Okay. James was wondering, you talked about pool penetration. He's wondering how you measure that pool penetration.
Let's just say you have 100 people in your pool. How many individuals of that 100 did you reach this past year? Did you reach 50? Did you reach 75? And Josh's data shows that if you have 100, let's say you have 100 people in your pool and you make 100 calls. I'm trying to just make the math really easy here. If you made 100 calls and there's 100 people, you probably ought to be meeting about 75 or 80 people in your portfolio, which means there's about 15 or 20 or 25 people that you saw more than once, but you saw the vast majority of the people at least once. And then those people that are really in the throes of actually making a gift decision, you see more than one time. That's pool penetration. So if you have 100 people in your prospect pool and you only saw 40 of them, you didn't penetrate your pool very far. And Josh's data shows that the more successful fundraisers are those that meet a larger number of their people in their pool.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, Joe, we are at the end of our presentation today. We just hit 1 o'clock, so I want to thank you very much for spending the last hour with us. We had about 250 people on the line spending their lunchtime with us, so thank you so much, Joe. And then to those of you on the phone that did submit questions that we didn't get to, we apologize, but Joe has offered, if you have additional questions that you would like some answers to, you can reach out to him personally. There's his email address on the screen. If you have any questions about Stelter or the webinar, you can reach out to myself or Jeremy Stelter. And if you have any questions about Stelter's products or services, you can visit us at stelter.com. And then finally, we wanted to let you know that we did record it, so barring any technical difficulties, the recording and the presentation slides will be on our website, on our library of webinars at stelter.com/webinars, and I expect to have those up by Monday for sure. So thanks again, Joe. We really appreciate your time today and closing out our 2018 webinar series. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will talk to you next year. Bye-bye.